All right. Hi, everybody. We are back here today again with Nadia Natali. So Nadia is a somatic experiencing practitioner, and she's the creator of something called DanceMedicine. So if you want to learn more about that, check out her episode that is out right at the moment for our trauma series. And like we've been doing with a lot of the guests, we try to bring them back again for a short question and answer. So if you have any questions during this live event with Nadia, please feel free to post them. Otherwise, we will go through some of the questions that have already been sent in to us. And Nadia, welcome back to the show.
Thank you. That's great. And I really enjoyed being with you during our interview.
Likewise, Nadia.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's super fun to have you back. And like I was telling you before, we've had some great feedback from your episode and lots of great experience from all the different guests that we talked to. So I really think this series is such an important series for people, and something that is more and more attention, I think, is being brought to how important working with trauma is. So getting these different flavors and these different experiences from all these different people is, in my mind, so valuable for people to start to explore. So Nadia, we will jump into some of them. So these are some of the questions that came in. So the first one was from basically asking about more from practical applications of how to quote unquote work with strong emotions when they come up in the moment. So this specific person was talking about anger, and she said, how do I work with that emotion so that I don't act out from that place and then cause more problems in my personal relationships? So I imagine lots of people are dealing with that when a strong emotion comes up, particularly something like anger. What's the best way to work with that in the moment so that we don't, I guess, maybe project it onto others or act from that place? Yeah, or suppress it, I think, equally is just as much of a problem.
Well, I'm impressed somebody would ask that question about their own anger. So there already sounds like there's an intention to make a difference. That is really the first most important consideration, is to have that incentive. And then once you find yourself in that, if you can actually find a pause, stop yourself, if you're willing to do that, what happens is there may be a sensation of what anger feels like inside, and this is where the person needs to go. They need to actually say to themselves, where am I feeling this sensation? And what happens next? So that's a pretty big deal. And if they can do that, it makes a big difference. It does a lot, changes the chemistry. It actually does a neurological change in the brain, and it makes a difference in relationships.
It makes me think of this when there's anger. It feels like there's this rush of momentum, and then what you're describing is almost like that pause puts a bit of a braking system in, so that you can actually land in the feeling sense of what's going on to be able to then work with the sensations that are being called to you to look at and feel and sense and almost hold a little bit more closely, rather than just falling into that momentum, which can then drive you into, I don't know, a wall of bricks or something. If you're about right. It also makes me think of Viktor Frankl's a quote from Viktor Frankl, where he said something along, I might be paraphrasing, but he said something along the lines of, within every, I'll come back to that. It slipped my mind right now, but.
One of the things I'm wondering about with that is because anger particularly is like there's a lot of volition in anger, right? Like it really stirs things up. How do people touch in on it? I guess maybe almost, can you walk someone through what that process is like to stay with the sensation? Like, I feel like sometimes people are become even so disconnected from the sensation. What is the experience of that with it? Like, what do they do with it? Sometimes it feels like trying to hold on to a hot coal. So what's the experience of staying with it sort of practically for somebody? How would you walk them through that process a little bit?
Okay, I'm going to answer that, but I'm going to say something before. There's a very well-known Zen Roshi, Sasaki Roshi, who used to say, before he died at 107, that his anger he used to experience as an internal massage. And I thought that was really cool. So that kind of gives you a sense of it's not a terrible thing if you have it. And the fact that he lived that long might say something to all of us. Anger is an internal massage. And if we can actually feel, again, the sensation, we're going to stay with it. So what, as I suggested a moment ago, what happens next when you actually sense the anger? Where are you sensing it? Are you in your stomach? Is it in your throat? In your head? And, do you feel like you want to burst? And so just to give them a sense of verbalizing to themselves while it's happening, what is happening, and to keep with it as much as possible. And what happens is we tend to pop out because the brain wants to solve the problem. And so we're going to get back into, oh, damn it all, I'm going to fill in the blank. And we have to remember to come back. And this is where the intention to do this needs to be strong. If we can keep that intention and keep the pause and then keep the sensation of the attention of going to the sensation, it'll calm down. It'll calm down. And if we know that our behavior will actually be a lot more intelligent in how we handle the situation once we've calmed down, we can actually be more effective. So that's as best as I can do with that.
Yeah, I like too that you brought awareness to the thinking part of it, because that is part of it that I think just keeps us stuck in the cycle. Because every time we get the thoughts that come up in the storyline, we reignite the same neurochemistry, we create more of the same sensation in the body, and it just kind of keeps this roller coaster going. I remember an exercise that we were taught a long time back by a Buddhist nun, and she would talk about it as a fear exercise. And the fear stood as an acronym for feel it in your body, embrace the feeling, allow the thoughts to dissolve. And then from that place, if you can hold that, just that sensation for a minute and a half to a couple of minutes, then almost spontaneously what has the opportunity to come up is this remembering is the last part of other people going through something similar. So the idea was that suffering has this way of either pulling us away from each other, or it has a way of actually kind of connecting us to each other. And so the last part was almost when the sensation starts to unravel a little bit and dissolve, this natural sensation of openness, awareness, and warmth tends to surface that sometimes unites humanity in a different way through suffering.
That's really great. And to add to all of that, Peter Levine suggests that when the thought comes back up, to say to yourself, I am having the thought that, and then whatever is following, because what you're doing is you're giving some space behind the sensation. So there's nothing wrong with the sensation. Let's not make it bad. It's fine. But how can we work with it? So how can we stay with the sense of massage, and then the thought pops in, I'm having the thought that, oh, that means I can actually come back. And so this is you're actually doing a little back and forth with yourself, and it takes you away from the whole scene. So it's very successful if you're willing to do it, and it takes some maturity. Yeah.
Well, and practice, it's like anything, trying to find that pause when we are used to, I think this is like why it can be so beneficial to find time like in nature and going for walks and slowing things down, and in general in your life. Yoga and meditation, like they naturally have pauses within them. So it's like a practice, and you start to develop a skill around that. And then I feel like eventually your default becomes less being so reactive and being more almost like the observer, kind of like what Peter Levine was talking about a little bit more. You're kind of watching it and questioning a little bit, rather than being an active participant in the the messiness that can come up from it.
Yes, and I just want to add that, and I sort of alluded to it, just not to judge the process, not to judge the anger, but to actually feel good about the fact that you are building this pause ability. Yeah, cool.
I liked it when you talked about the internal massage because, I mean, prior to being a naturopathic doctor and an osteopath, I actually was a registered massage therapist for a period of time. So we used to talk a lot of times around what that good pain actually can feel like. And it was kind of when you'd be working on an area that you knew needed to be worked with, but it was uncomfortable, but there was something around it that still felt kind of like a good pain, like a satisfying. So I think sometimes that might be a little bit more of a struggle to feel that with working with emotions, but there's something around that that I like the interconnection of that thought process. If there's something that I know is actually beneficial for me and I just need to kind of have it worked out a little bit and nurtured and massaged a little bit, that's actually it's a nice place to go to in my head to think about it.
Yeah.
I wanted to, just because I had mentioned that I wanted to share this, Viktor Frankl, as you probably know, he survived the Holocaust and he became a psychologist. And one of his quotes is, "Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and ultimately our freedom."
No, that's beautiful. And he's right on the mark there. Beautiful. That space is so important. Yeah. Yeah. I call it a threshold, which is another way of looking at it. Just the place where you're thinking about something or you're reactive, and there is a possibility to go to the other side, to be with it rather than reacting. And that threshold is the most difficult part. It's not, once you get there, it's pretty much free sailing. Yes, we do come back to the thinking and go back and forth, but once you've moved over that threshold, the same thing. So that's really cool. I like that. Yeah.
What I think is interesting, because I've worked with this within my own practice and working through my own struggles and challenges and trauma for probably well over a decade. What I found is my yoga practice, which included the movement, which included the meditation practice. When we speak of witnessing, so creating a bit of a space so that you can see your reactions, you can see the stuff bubbling up. I felt like it was easy almost at times to actually create, with the intention of creating a space, I actually created a bit of I was being repulsed by what was coming up. And I was trying to keep everything at an arm's distance and not allowing it to touch me, not allowing to actually feel the sensations that were coming up, and under the guise of I was bearing witness. And it, I recognized that was coming up, and I wanted to work with it and feel what it would actually be to dive in, hold it, and then when it became overwhelming, to step back and get a sense of almost like wearing the world like a loose garment. So it's not overwhelming me, but I can be with it and hold it until it almost relayed what it needed to relay for me to begin the healing process. And that healing process involved being with, holding it, sensing it. What advice would you have around that with regards to when bearing witness becomes, I can't go there?
So that's where the term resource comes in. And to describe what that would be is to find a place either inside or an image or a pet or something that you have that's positive, and to bring it to you as frequently as you can, so you have it well practiced, so that when you go to the place where you feel this repulsion, that you can actually call in the resource and then just very gently go to the edge of the place that you're feeling the repulsion, the repelling, and go back and forth. And I think when that happens, you are feeling, like a kid who feels safe next to his mother's, leg, the skirt just hanging on. It's a safe place to go, and it's a positive place to go. And then you're willing to go out to these other more uncomfortable places once you know you have that. So you play with that. And, all of this is somewhat of a practice. I mean, this is why I brought up the word intention originally, because it's so important that we really want to do this. We care about this for ourselves and for our relationships. And so if we see the value of it and the importance of it, we'll act on it, and we'll find our resource, and we'll play with it. And then we're more willing to test and take ourselves to these places that are difficult.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yeah, well said. Next question on here was, how do I know if I'm dealing with unresolved trauma? Are there any signs or symptoms that would help me know that it is trauma that I'm needing to heal versus just regular daily stress, or is there a difference?
Well, I would first of all say that probably all of us are somewhat traumatized, more or less. And the way we handle stress is going to be a pattern that we have developed to protect ourselves. So it really doesn't matter if there's a story or not. I would suggest to this person not to worry about that. It may be fun to find out, but it's not important. That what's most important is to be able to notice what patterns that I have when I'm stressed that are interfering with my relationships or interfering with my work. And then to just assume that this is something I do when I need to take care of myself. And it's going to show up this way. It's not a negative. It's just something that may be interfering. Probably there is some kind of a story, and I don't think it's important we waste a lot of time, I think, actually going to those stories. And it's fun. If you want to play with it, that's fine. But it really doesn't matter.
When you're talking about sort of this self-inquiry of checking in to see what patterns come up, what are some patterns that that you've seen, just to sort of for examples for people so that they have an idea of even what some of those patterns might look like? Well,
the impulse to bolt, when it gets uncomfortable, the pulling back and removing yourself from a conversation, hiding. I had a whole list of them. Just, physical contractions that happen in the body. I mean, these are, all of these things show up emotionally, socially, mentally, physically. So any pattern that shows up that is interfering with your life, you can assume is one of them, and to hold it really gently with affection. All of these things were there to help us, and we now need to be able to explore beyond them, especially if they're social.
Yeah, and what's kind of nice with that is that if you take the time to think about, or just to become aware of the patterns, you're kind of inherently creating a bit of a pause, because you're not sort of acting into it, you're being aware of the fact that you're doing it. So within that awareness, you're actually making space for that pause. Yes. That you talked about earlier. That's such a fundamental part of then actually, literally retraining the mind. You need to have that pause so that you don't go down the same habitual neural networks that are set up, that you're just doing that automatic programming over and over and over again. If you can catch it, as soon as you catch it and you're like, oh, I'm doing it again, that's that pause that's going to start the whole process of breaking things
unraveling. Yes, it'll unravel, and it's an ongoing journey, because we unravel one and then there's one under that and we unravel the next one, and I just find it fascinating. I just love this process. I think it's really interesting.
It makes me think of the story, the experience that Dr. Peter Levine spoke of at his workshop that we were present at a couple of years ago, where he talked about intergenerational trauma. Mm-hmm. And he said a lot of his patients that come in that have either direct or indirect experience with the Holocaust would oftentimes during his sessions speak of smelling burning bodies. And it was, I mean, it was really hard to hear as he was telling these stories, but every time they would feel triggered or an uncomfortable sensation or memory came up for during his sessions with his patients or clients, Dr. Levine would hear them speak of smelling burning bodies. And he said that once they had healed the trauma, that smell, that sensation never returned. That's how they knew that that had passed.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yes. Boy. Yeah, we do have intergenerational. We hold all these things from, ancestors and so on in our nervous system. Yeah.
Well, one thing I think is really fascinating with intergenerational trauma is that, and this was kind of even brought up in the course we were at with Dr. Levine too, but when in the moment when you actually heal that or really sort of resolve that trauma or heal that trauma, that it kind of ripples throughout time. It sort of stops that trauma from passing down in the future, and it heals the trauma from the ancestors. And in the one with Peter Levine was talking about, he was talking about, which is something that's come up in huge amounts, and we've done a couple of episodes on this, was the trauma that's happened with the indigenous cultures. And he was working specifically in this video that he was showing with healing this past generational trauma. And when the people in the moment healed, they actually felt, and could literally see it. They could actually see their ancestors healing as they healed. And I mean, the whole group
gives me chills.
I get goosebumps again, just back to the feeling of it. And then in other episodes we've talked to, and Dr. Todd, he talked about the same thing with working with trauma, that once that heals in the now, you heal that across past and future, which I mean is really quite phenomenal to think that, we think of time being so linear, but it's not quite so linear in this in another way of viewing it. So it's never, you think about that, and it's like when we work with our stuff, it's like, it makes me think of those old quotes, even by Gandhi, be the change you wish to see in the world. If you want to affect the world, the biggest thing we can ever do is just constantly work on ourselves, and that ripples out in ways that I don't think we can quite comprehend yet.
Yeah. Yes. Very well.
Nadia, another question. This is 2 parts, so maybe we'll break this down. It's around triggers. And so the first part is, are there any specific strategies around triggers? And how does one know that they have actually been triggered? What are some of the signs that one has actually been triggered? So maybe we'll start there. I think part of that you've probably talked about. Maybe we can talk a little bit about what a trigger is and what are some of the different ways that it can show up for people.
Well, I would say that anything that makes us feel uncomfortable is a trigger. So I'm just going to put it categorically. Anything that's uncomfortable is a trigger that we can deal with if we, again, just sense what that feels like inside. So if I'm feeling nervous or upset, can I actually locate that in my body and stay with it? See, the thing that I like to emphasize is that we go there and then we pop out. And it's really important that we come back, and we keep coming back to that. So I don't know where else to go with that question. Do you have any, did that?
You have anything around that?
I mean, it's just pretty simple. And then what was the other part of that question? What is a trigger?
So the second part of that is, when is it best for me to minimize my triggers versus when are my triggers a part of the process that I ultimately need to heal to the point that they don't trigger me anymore? So I guess where
that's a balance, right?
Yeah. How much do I try to avoid the stuff, and then how much do I need? That's a sign that
there's an edge. there should be an edge that we begin to sense. So I have to know myself with my triggers, and then I have to see when I just touch it and if I can come back to my resource or to myself or to my body or something, that a pet, an image, and then to see if I can go take it on another step. So I would go very slowly. The slower you go, the faster it resolves itself. So it would be wanting to be something that you don't do too fast and too intensely. So just go a little bit at a time, and then notice, how am I feeling? And then go back again. It just seems pretty clear.
Almost like lean in, and then if you need to come out.
Pull back. Yes. Pull back, for goodness sake. Don't push it. If you're afraid of the water, just, put your toe in it and have somebody there with you and play. And, just if you're afraid of the water, whatever it is, just really literally and figuratively put yourself in inch by inch and come back, and then play with it. Have somebody there if you want. Make it a game for yourself, and as gentle and as loving as possible. That's really important. You push yourself, you get into more trouble. Sorry.
Yeah, it was one of the things I really liked about the somatic experiencing work is that it's a gentle process, and it's letting you kind of be the guide in a lot of ways of knowing what feels okay and when it's too much. And so you've always got this. It's always within you to kind of touch in, and then if it's too much, you pull back out again. And there's different strategies to help get that person sort of back out of that, to kind of calm back down, and then you can come back into it again when it's this back and forth as you keep sort of pendulum sort of come in and out, and can keep going a little farther and then come back out, and you sort of baby step your way into it as it works for you.
Yeah, it's a swing, a very gentle swing, but you want to come back out. Your nervous system needs to know you're going to bring yourself out. That's what's important. When you push yourself, your nervous system gets, freaked out, and it's not able to learn. So you need to come out for the sake of your nervous system. Yeah.
It almost makes me think that we end up as adults becoming the parent that oftentimes maybe we didn't, that wasn't there for us in the way we needed for them to be, that you're becoming that for yourself.
Yeah, I like to say I'm growing myself up. Yeah.
Nadia, can you speak of, it just made me think of sound, the use of sound that Dr. Peter Levine would oftentimes incorporate within his trainings and within his practice. What's the significance of sound, and how is it incorporated within practice?
It was interesting. What was it? The woo sound. Whoa. And it goes into different parts of the body. And I think that you're vibrating. I'm not sure. I mean, I even asked some of the assistants there when I was doing the advanced training, and nobody seemed to really know exactly why, but we are activating, if you go at different pitches, different parts of your body to be soothed and activated, not activated, but opened and soothed at the same time. So it's a very soothing thing to do. Yeah.
I know
I'm
part of it
more myself.
I know part of how I understand it too is if you look at sort of where the vagus nerve traverses, right? And the vagus nerve is both sensory and motor. So it has both components. So it creates changes in the viscera, but it also receives information and comes it back up to the brain. And so when we do that deep sort of which kind of sits down in here, I think that tone is somehow kind of creating a certain oscillation that's affecting in the gut, that is affecting the vagus nerve, and probably creating some vagal tone and changing that on some capacity that's in the sensory fibers that are taking it back up and helping to settle things down at some point. I'm sure there's an aspect of that plays into it, but like for people to try it, we do this with our girls a lot too. We'll get them to kind of, we've got a 3 and a 5-year-old. So it's like when stuff's coming up, they'll often practice, and you'll hear them do that at different times now as they're processing stuff. So, but it feels good. These are kind of the things, just try it out in your body and see how it feels.
Mind you, the little ones don't have any apprehension with regards to vocalizing. I think, as parents, we're often
we're inhibited.
Trying to inhibit the little ones from, don't make too much sound, or don't scream, or don't do this. But I think the natural inclination for little ones is that when they're feeling upset, there's temper tantrums, there's outlets, there's screaming, there's vocalizing, and it's all healthy ways at that age to be able to work through whatever is coming up for them.
Yeah, the tantrum one is where something gets caught, and I don't know if that's so healthy, but it's happening, and when it's happening, all we need to do is to just be there quietly with them, and it's okay. We'll get through this together, that kind of thing. But all the crying and all the screaming, that's not a tantrum, is actually a release. I mean, this is what we as animals, humans as animals, are actually letting it out rather than constricting it. So for the most part, I agree. It's really good for them to express that and to be held and to normalize it and to make it safe for them. Yes. Yeah.
Nadia, the last question we have on our list here is, this is
around boundaries.
This is around boundaries. I think a lot of people can probably relate to this. So
boundaries are the most important thing in life.
This one is, I'm struggling with creating better boundaries in my life. I feel better when I'm creating more boundaries, but it seems to cause more frustration and more stress for the people that I'm creating these boundaries around. Do you have any suggestions on how to navigate this?
Well, I think boundaries are absolutely important. And I just want to add that how you create and deliver your boundary is probably very, very important. So if you are creating a boundary, you might want to articulate to those around you that I am needing right now, I need some time, I need some space. And although this is occurring, I really can't handle this right now. So please give me some time. If you can deliver it in a very gentle, grown-up way, even though you're not feeling it at that moment, you won't be offending somebody. So it's really a question of how you do it. But boundaries are probably one of the most important qualities that we don't know how to handle. We don't know what to do with. And it's just giving ourselves a sense of who we are and how much we can handle and feel okay with and safe. And that needs to be honored by another person, but you're not shutting them out and slamming the door. So that's the issue.
It makes me think of something too. I remember just around the concept of boundary, because there's some times where, it's this idea that I think we might have talked about this a little bit in our original episode, but around this sort of idea that we have to always be nice too, right? And sometimes that's in lieu of being maybe totally taken advantage of and still feeling like we need to be nice, and nothing about that feels right. And
that might even be a trauma response.
Right. And there are even certain people that a healthy boundary is really not having much contact at all with, or none in some ways. And I remember the way one person described that I really liked is one of my old teachers, Dr. David Hawkins, and he was an author of a book called Power versus Force. And he had a lot of other books, but he had an interesting way of talking about it. He would talk about things sort of like levels of consciousness. And so he said, because a lot of times I think people think that then boundaries are in that plays in with love, like I love or I don't love someone if I'm spending time or not spending time with them. And he explained it in this way. He goes, you could love a Komodo dragon, but you're not necessarily going to go climb in the cage with the Komodo dragon. like there's a reality to that certain people or certain situations are not healthy for you. So you can still have a respect or a love for that, but you're not going to put yourself in a position that's not healthy for you or not safe for you, and it's not loving for yourself.
Yeah, so the sense of loving yourself in a gentle, kind way will actually stir the respect of others towards you. They'll actually think more, they'll love you even more. If you can say, at this moment, I am exhausted, I really need to take a break. I hope you understand, but this is what I need to do to take care of myself. I am actually giving an example of how I am doing best for myself and how you can do the same for yourself. And so we're both going to have this in our relationship. And it's actually much more loving to the person you're with, because you're actually imparting some information to them and how they can be with themselves. And they will actually have more regard for you and want to be with you more, because they're hearing you know how to be with yourself and know how to protect yourself. That's very important.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's such an important point too, that then you actually become a living example of that for others.
Yes.
I think of that a lot with parenting in so many places too. It's like where parents put themselves, I shouldn't say parents, I would say parents, but I would say most of the time I think moms, because they're doing so many different things, and they often put themselves on the bottom of the totem pole. And when they start to put themselves back up there, they become an example for their kids on how important it is to make sure that you care for yourself.
Yes, and to show respect for your child, and for them, for the parent to say thank you to the child, instead of saying, now you have to say thank you after they were given something. You don't need to do that. I never ask my children to say thank you to anybody, because I always thank them. I was equally respectful towards them, and they just picked that up naturally. So when something came along, they thanked the person without having to be told. So it's really important to have self-respect and to show it for especially children who they're just treated very often like, a child will feel like they want to know why they can't do something, and the parents will say, well, because I said so. And that isn't actually being respectful to the child. That you want to be able to say, it's because it's the time, we're going to have dinner in a few minutes and we can do it at another time, and explain something and then say, I'm sorry, we can't do it right now. So you're actually creating a boundary, but you're saying it respectfully to them as well. Yeah. Yeah, we need to show respect to other people. And when you want to have boundaries, you just have to be respectful to the other person and creating it.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful.
Maybe I wanted to bring up the flyer that Nadia, we're going to bring up the flyer of the event that you're hosting, and maybe you can speak a little bit more about that for the audience who's interested in looking more into your work.
Well, this work really was an event that I did in Ojai, physically in town, where I was the DJ and had people come in and dance for a couple of hours. And it was a very safe place to come. And I'm very, very, very careful in how I create the music and build a wave of music from a meditative up to a more intense, and then come down again and another little wave, and then end up in a spiritual place. I do a lot of work with dance and movement, and it's not something that's been possible in the last year and a half now, almost. And so this is done on Zoom, so people can show up. It's free. I really love the sense that we can all, in the gallery view, we can all see each other's dancing and be in a common, we can dance, we can do this together as an event and feel the connection with each other through the common rhythm. And otherwise, I work with people privately and do movement and use dance to actually go into the trauma that is now residing in the body, and we're able to somatically reach into that. With this event, and actually people say they come out of it feeling great. I see them, acting out their anger, just physically and running around, and they say they just feel so relaxed afterwards. So I do a number of events, but this one is the one that's on Zoom right now.
When you were
anybody who wants to, you're welcome to come. I hope to see you.
That's great. When you were speaking of, working with your personal trauma and figuring out when you can lean in and when you can come out, I almost feel like then the next level of working with whatever's coming up for a person is to do it within the level of community, like within the setting of community. Can you speak a little bit of the social aspect of healing and what that is indicative of when it comes to our healing process? Oh, can you unmute?
I'm sorry, I'm thinking of my trip to Namibia where I danced with the Bushmen, and the experience of their once a week they get together dancing as a healing form for the community. And you see these women, these old 80-year-old little Bushmen are the doctors, these women, and they come in and they shake, and then they bring in somebody who needs healing and they shake over them. And then they pull them back, and it's really quite beautiful. And I had an opportunity to actually dance with them, which was unbelievable. I think that if we can feel safe, it's really tricky to have a community dance where you can come together with other people and feel safe. And this was the most safe from sort of creepy energies that can come into this sort of thing. And so when I established mine, I was very careful if somebody was behaving inappropriately, I would just pull them out and say that, we're just not here to do this here. So that people could actually feel safe to go in, do an internal journey, and then come out and be part of a group, and we'll all hold hands and pull each other around like a big rope. And, so it actually has both the sense of being able to be safe with not being connected and to be able to connect if you want to, but not in a, as I said, more creepy way. That happens quite a lot. So it's tricky. It's a tricky thing to establish. Yeah.
So having that safe space to be able to allow your essence almost, or bits and pieces of you to be exposed within the safety of community. It also makes me think of just, even the Native community, even, my Persian background. And there's so many ancient cultures that incorporate the song and dance. And even when we were speaking with, or when we had attended Dr. Bessel Vanderkolt's workshop again 2 years ago, that was a big part of his research, in that he found that, along with all these technologically advanced ways of facilitating healing, he found that the most effective was actually, going and seeing what they did in India, for example, after the major floods that happened. Or he went to different parts of the world, him and his team, to observe what people in those cultures were doing in facilitating healing. And he found that it was mostly around community, around movement, so some sort of movement, whether it was dance or yoga, and also like massage, and singing. Exactly.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, it was almost like he was talking about the particular, I think, in Thailand after the typhoons and stuff, and the tsunami. And they actually said there was a bunch of drug reps there trying to hand out Prozac and all these types of things. And he said, thinking that they were coming there to teach them. And he goes, they learned so much because they found that they inherently in the culture had so many ways that they naturally took care of trauma, because they incorporated community, they incorporated movement, dance, massage, and touch. And there was a ceremony sort of tied in with all these things that generally incorporates all of that. And when we recently talked to one of the Mohawk elders, kind of tied into this indigenous trauma, same idea. You talk about community and ceremony, and how important ceremony was, because ceremony kind of incorporates so many of those pieces of it,
and which creates a sacred space. Even when you're speaking of safe like the sexual innuendo that can oftentimes creep in, when you're doing it within the context of ceremony, within, when elders come in and hold a particular space, there's this sacredness that creates a space that is conducive for healing to occur.
That's important. It can't heal if it isn't safe. Because that's what happened, is that we got traumatized because we weren't safe. So it's really very critical. Yeah.
Beautiful. Nadia, where is the best place for people to go to learn more about your work again? Just can mention here.
So I have a website, and it's NadiaNatali.com, just my name with the .com. They can go to that website.
Super. And we've got those links in the show notes of the episode that's out right now on Inspire Health Podcast. And
we'll copy and paste it below this video as well.
Okay, that's great.
So Nadia, wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us again and sharing your insights and answering a bunch of our questions.
Any
Yes,
final thoughts or any final messages, Nadia, that you wanted to share?
No, I feel that intention is a critical aspect of healing, and it's just something that has to be felt physically. Intention often is a thought, I want this or that, or I need this or that. But actually, if we can actually take it in, and when we are healing and working with people or ourselves, we can hold that intention that I want to work with my anger, and then to actually sense the intention as an internal experience, as a sensation, it's far more profound, and it really sticks with you, and it'll hold you through, and it'll remind you when you are having an episode or a moment or a difficult time. So I just want to end with that.
Thanks.
You know, Nadia, we talked to Lynn McTaggart a while back, and she's written the Intention Experiment, and she's done that's been her research has been in intention. She wrote The Field I think 25 years ago or something.
Oh, wow.
She's been talking about that stuff for a long time, and had the largest global intention experiment around it. And one of the things that she would talk about was just what you said, was that the importance of connecting the intention to the felt sense of it.
Yes.
And I remember even like Dr. Joe Dispenza talking about that. And when you look at it from sort of an electromagnetic field perspective, because we do emit this electromagnetic field, they would say that the thinking part is the electric part of the field and the feeling part is the magnetic part of the field. So together, that is what actually emits this electromagnetic field that interacts with the world around us and also dials in sort of that frequency in many ways. So I think that's come up very many times about the importance of feeling. So even when people do stuff like vision boarding and whatever it is that you want to do to try to create some shift in your life, you need to be able to really connect to that felt sense. That I think is such an important part. So thank you for bringing that awareness up again.
Yeah. Very welcome.
Nadia, thank you so much. Always a pleasure to talk to you. And
you guys are great.
We'll be in touch again. And when your book is done, please reach out to us again, and we'll get into that. I think that would be fun.
Okay, thank you.
And to the audience who tuned in today, thank you so much for joining us and tuning in episode after episode. Our episode, I think, with Dr. Pat Ogden is coming up next Monday, and we'll also be doing a live event with her as well next week. So please tune in to that as well.
Yeah, so this is the series. If you haven't checked it out, go on the Inspire Health podcast. It's been gradually getting a little bigger as we've been putting in extra episodes because we keep finding different people that were wanting to share their insights. So, but it's a really phenomenal series. And this next group that's coming up is going to be, I think we're going to have Dr. Pat Ogden, Dr. Ruth Lanius, Dr. Claire Payne. Some of the episodes that I did earlier on before, right when COVID had started, that when we first began the trauma series. So these will be ones that we will pull back and revisit. So again, Nadia, thank you so much. And thank you everybody out there. And we will talk to you soon, okay?